Okay, what's up, guys? Ray here. Um, Today I have a special guest. I have my friend Yuna, and she is the CEO and owner and founder of a shoe company called Keep Company. So if you need some new shoes, check them out. And on the side, she has an astrology practice. Is that what they call it? She does astrology, and I wanted to talk about that with her today. What's up, Yuna?
What up?
How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Uh, so I heard this quote, J.P. Morgan. He said, millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, maybe I should know more about this stuff.
Well, you were already into astrology before you read that quote. Come on.
Well, kind of, not as much as you are.
I mean, I think astrology, like anything, is basically about understanding, reading patterns and reading flow. And just like the stock market is pretty much, if you're really good at the stock market, if you're good at investing or whatever, the stock market, my dad always talks to me about this. The stock market basically shows you the flow of the macro, micro trends, economic trends of the world. This is how people, it shows people's desires, what they're buying, what's valued to them. So astrology is just like the stock market in the sense where it's like it's about reading energy. And I feel like any of the tools that people use, whether it's something more traditional, like, watching the news or following the stock market, to something that's a little bit more esoteric, like astrology or tarot or whatever other kind of predictive thing that you want to do, is all about understanding what energy is and kind of like just reading the forecast and understanding like the energy, the broader energy, that's going on in the world. That's what I think.
Well, if that's the case, why aren't all Wall Street dudes like master astrologers?
Well, I mean, I think you just end up reading energy in a way that's like comfortable for you. So I think a lot of Wall Street guys are going to be much more data driven and much more numbers driven, because that's what makes them feel comfortable. Or if you're like a science guy, you're going to be really interested in like facts and experiments and proofs. Unless you're like more of a theoretical science person, then you're going to be more interested in, it's just how people want to process the information in the world. So also like in Eastern culture, your astrology or your numerology is like, it's very like commonly practiced, way more common, I think, than in the Western world. Like I have found, like, for a lot of my Eastern friends or, Asian friends or whatever, have an Asian background, most of them know what time they're born. But if you ask like my white friends, my Western friends, like when they're born, they're always like, I don't know. Where do I even find that out? My mom doesn't even remember, or they have to find their birth certificate or whatever. But, for somebody like me, like my parents did my numerology like from the get. And, or like, when my brother, there's like a very famous person who gives names in Korea, and my father met him and he said, oh, I'll give you a name for your son. It's all based on like numerology and I Ching. So it's very like, it's cultural, I think. I don't know.
Wow, a name giver.
Yes.
He's like,
So they like calculated against my brothers. In Korea, there's a thing called saju, which means four pillars, and the four pillars are, birth, hour, day, year, month, and then they calculate, like, it's basically astrology, and it's kind of also like I Ching stuff, and they kind of see, oh well, your son needs more water in his makeup, so when he creates a name, he's going to give a name that's going to give more water, give more of that element to my brother. So my brother, his whole life, like when he was born, was named Tobin, Kim Tobin. Tobin is an American and a Korean name, just like my name is American and Korean. But they like, when he was like 12 or whatever, one day my dad came home from a trip to Korea and he's like, oh yeah, your Korean name's Hisu. And now he just called, and that's my brother's Korean name. So, a lot of people would do that earlier on, but it's just, again, it's just about like energy and flow and seeing, sort of reading those broader things. And I think it depends on what culture you're from. So
I wonder if my parents nailed my name or
I
if
think,
they're way off.
No, I think so. Because think about it, you a king.
Oh,
Raymond,
okay.
that's king of the world.
I mean, that's a Spanish translation of my name.
But don't you, I mean, I think name power and name magic, name energy is like very, very important. And I often think somebody's name like determines, it definitely profoundly affects them on a very deep level. And that's why some people like birth themselves and come up with a different name for themselves.
Oh, I
So,
like.
I think name magic's so powerful. Like if you read any like if you're into any kind of wizard stuff, like all the like the there's like a whole form of magic is understanding the true name of something, and that gives you dominion over that, or that gives you, some kind of contact and interconnectedness with that thing if
Right.
you know the name. And that's why a lot of people don't like hide their names, because they don't want people to it's revealing to people. So like sometimes like for astrology, yeah, I'll tell you what my astrology is, but to some people will ask me like, oh, what's your astrology or what's your blah blah blah, and depending on how I'm feeling, I might not tell them.
What?
Yeah,
But they
because
could just look up your birthday.
yeah, but if they don't know your hour, your birth time is your birthday and your birth year. That's like all pretty like general stuff, and that's also, it's very like helpful. And for the average person, they don't need to know more than that. But if you're really interested in astrology, you really need to know the time in order to get a really clear reading on things.
See, that's what's confusing to me. Is last time I was talking to you, you're like, you have this rising sign and this sun sign and this moon sign, and now I'm supposed to read all three when I'm checking my horoscope.
Well, some people say you have to read all three. For me personally, so my moon sign is Pisces. I'm gonna reveal that to everybody on this thing. But a lot of times when I read the Pisces moon sign, I used to read all three, and I didn't really feel I didn't really feel like it often like applied to what I was going through. So I just say use your intuition, because sometimes people really identify with their sun sign, and sometimes people really identify with their rising sign, and it can really fluctuate. For me, like I really read both, and sometimes they're both very applicable to me, and sometimes it's really clear, like one or the other, like really kind of hits home. That's the other thing with astrology. Astrology is, based on numbers. It's a science, and it's based on observation. It's been around for like super, super long, thousands of years, right? It's all linked to the stars. So much of the interpretation of astrology is so important. It's like going to therapy. Like, therapy is good for you, but if you have a therapy session with a therapist that you're not feeling, then like you're kind of like, I don't want to go to therapy. This was totally unhelpful. But if you find the right person that can kind of like guide you in the way that connects with you, then you can get a lot out of that session. And it's the same thing with astrology. Like sometimes I'll read certain astrologers and I'll be like, this person, like, I don't feel what they're saying at all. And I just don't even read that person's thing. But other people, I'll read their thing and I'm like, oh, this really speaks to me and I feel connected to it. And then that's somebody that I'm going to read more of and consider more. And it doesn't mean one person's wrong and one person's right. It's more about you understanding how to follow your intuition and how to understand, how to hear and listen, how to communicate, and how other people are communicating with you, and identifying what you relate to more, because ultimately everything's going to be personal, right? Like this whole thing is about a balance of macro versus micro. So macro is the movement of the stars and the planets and all that stuff, but micro on your level, you have to understand how to interpret that and what that means for you, and it can be different things for different people.
Right. Like when you read your horoscope in the newspaper, you don't know if it's just some intern writing it.
Yeah, and it probably is just about your sun sign, and you have so many. You're so much more complex than that. So I can give you some generic advice about, you, because you're a guy, you're a certain age, and you're Filipino, and that'll probably apply, but it's not really. That doesn't really. It's not very much in depth. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So.
Where did astrology come from? Like I want to like in my head it like came from ancient Egypt or ancient China or something, but
Well,
I have no idea.
all ancient civilizations have astrology, have astronomy practice, and so it's very, very common from the very like from forever to try and understand our place in the universe by comparing it to the stars. So, I mean, some form of astrology and divination has been around like pretty much forever. I mean, since human civilization, since real human civilization has developed in culture. I mean, you can see evidence of it everywhere. Ancient Egypt, ancient China,
Well, yeah, like the Mayans have their own whole entire different astrology.
Totally. And you look at all of the different buildings like that were built in the beginning of civilization, and you'll see so many of them are aligned with planets and stars and where things rise and where things appear. I mean, those are, I mean, that's just everywhere. You can just do a Google it, and you'll see there's like 10, a huge list of places that, when the sun rises a certain way, or when the moon rises, or a certain time of year, solstice or whatever, those things were built based on the stars. I mean, think about the stars were our sense of time, our sense of season, our sense of place. I mean, that was like the ultimate like watch map, whatever.
I just have questions. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I just have so many questions. I especially have questions about like the origins, right? Like who decided that Cancer was a crab, and that like I'm Sagittarius? Who decided that I get to be like this bow and arrow symbol centaur man?
Well, I mean, there's all different kinds of astrology, like you said. Like there's Vedic astrology, there's Mayan astrology, and all those things are different. So Western astrology, all of those crab, centaur, all those are ancient Greek. They're and all like the constellations and the things that they relate to are from Western ancient civilization. So a lot of that is based in like Greek, and because Greeks were the ones who really progressed a lot of astronomy back in the day. So it's the people who identified the stars in that system that we're basing it off of.
Right.
What else do you want to know?
I don't know. Now I had I should have wrote them down. I had a bunch of questions. How do we use this in our everyday lives?
Okay, well, I think that's a really good question. And I think the thing that's hard for me with people who are into astrology, and I'm just somebody who's really interested in it, and I read a lot about it, and I try to have a practice, and I try to think about it, but I definitely would not call myself an astrologer. That to be a real astrologer requires a lot of discipline and focused study, and I want to just be really clear about that from the get, because I'm not like some I don't want to claim that at all. And it's kind of sucks when people claim stuff. And maybe that's just me. Like that's my personal approach.
I was impressed when I came over. You had all these charts printed out, and you knew all these angles and degrees and what all these little tiny symbols mean. And there's like hundreds of symbols. So I was like, okay, we got to do a podcast about this.
Well, all that stuff that I did was like kind of basic astrology. And I feel like, those are just the bones, and it's kind of like learning math. And I've always been good at math and always been good at geometry. So that is knowledge. That's not wisdom. The wisdom comes from being able to understand and interpret. And the better you get at it, I think the better you're able to read what those things mean. So, for example, I just really, I was hanging out with somebody recently, and they're like, oh yeah, this girl did my chart for me, and she said I was going to have a really horrible year, but that it would get better like at this point. And I kind of don't really feel that vibe of astrology, because I think obviously people use it to be predictive and for it to be a guide. But I also think that's a lot of like the ego assertion of the astrologer or of the reader onto the reading, because
it's filtering through their own psychology.
Yes, exactly. And I'm somebody who doesn't like to live my life in fear, and I don't like. There's so much room for interpretation. So, for example, if there's like a difficult aspect, which is normally like for the square, for example, a difficult aspect, that's a challenging aspect. That means there's going to be some tension. That's gonna the energies of certain things are going to create a tension between them that usually leads to progression or leads to a breakthrough. So is that negative? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on who you are, depends on the circumstances, and it depends on how you're reading it. So, but if I tell you, oh, you're going to have this tense thing and it's going to be gnarly, and then, it'll be cooler later, you're going to go into it with that energy instead of seeing tension as an opportunity for growth. Do you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
you're gonna be prepared about it. Maybe you're going to be even closed off to it, and you're not really even going to get this experience the same way. So, people talk about challenging aspects and easier aspects. Sometimes when an aspect is easier, that means there's a lot of flow of the energy, but maybe that'll make you like lazy, or maybe that'll make you complacent. There's lots of different, like the real talent and skill, I think, in astrology is in the interpretation. And being able to interpret it in a way and connecting your energy with the person that you're giving the reading to in a way that's going to be meaningful to them. And, I've had readings by many different astrologers, and there's always ones that I like feel more, and I'm like, oh, I connect with this person more, and they're able to communicate it to me in a way that's like more effective for me. That doesn't mean the other way isn't good. It's just not how I do it. Some people like to have fear. Some people like to have fear as a survival instinct, or that helps them make decisions. I personally am like not into that mode of living. So, it's a different approach, I guess.
So do you base a lot of your business decisions running your company on astrology?
Yes and no. Obviously, like I do.
Like production is the easy one, right? Like you want to drop this release at a certain time, but
yeah, I do certain release things, or I do certain like newsletters. I tend to look at the astrology of what's going on. But at the same time, like it's only a guide. Like I don't live my life do or die by astrology. I don't think anyone should be like married or chained to any kind of belief system in which it like completely affects their ability. That's when it becomes dogma, when you're only listening to it blindly. So for example, like Mercury retrograde, a lot of people are like,
everyone talks so much shit.
Yeah.
I'm like, the world's not going to stop.
Yes, exactly. The world's not going to stop. And it's also like a convenient, like sort of pop cultural, like a scapegoat, like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde, everything's fucked, so forget it. Or, oh, this is why I had a shitty day. And it's like, nah, you had a shitty day because you were irresponsible and you were hungover and you didn't do anything. You know what I mean? Or like, oh, your computer got stolen, not because it's Mercury retrograde, but because, there's like a huge, you know what I mean? Like some guy, you left your door unlocked and somebody wanted to make money. Like, it's really easy to like blame astrology for things. And that's fine. Like, especially when it's done lightheartedly, it doesn't really matter. But, like if you're really trying to use it as a guide, that's all it is. It's a guide. So for example, Mercury retrograde, you're really not supposed to make any purchases buying technological items, big purchases like that. You're not supposed to sign contracts during that time. Etc. Right? But sometimes it's like you got to sign the contract. You need that money. You got to do whatever. The company that you're doing business with isn't going to wait 3 weeks for the retrograde to like pass and get out of the show. Whatever. That's not to me. That's not like realistic. But Mercury retrograde might say, oh, okay, well, this is a time that and also like people just think, oh, everything gets messed up in retrograde. But retrograde is an opportunity for review. That's what a retrograde is. So a lot of times things come back from the past and you're given another opportunity to revisit them. Or let's say you get a contract and it's a retrograde. It's not the ideal time to sign it maybe, but you can still sign it. You just have to review it carefully. Be careful, be more. It's like, if you know that it's snowing outside, that doesn't mean you're not going to go outside and like handle your biz, but you're going to be prepared. You're going to wear a coat. You're going to bring a scarf. You're going to have your thermos of like hot coffee or whatever, so that when you go out, you're prepared to deal with the conditions of what's going on outside. And for me, like astrology really helps me to understand how I'm feeling or certain energies. Like let's say you have a day and like everyone's aggro to you and it's just gnarly and you don't feel right. You don't feel good and you're not really sure. You feel like you're in a cloud or, something like that. And, you know, maybe if you're not, you don't realize that like Mars is afflicted in a certain way. So when Mars is like, has some tension against it or has like a challenging aspect, that's when people get really snappy. And, that way it helps you to take it less personally. You understand, oh, this is just like a difficult time, you know, that people are, it's a challenging time where people are a little bit more short tempered. Whereas then maybe if you didn't know that, you take it all personally and you just be like, everyone's an asshole or I suck and I'm depressed now. You know what I mean? It's like things like that. It just kind of helps you understand the general vibe of the world. Or sometimes you'll feel really stuck and like, oh, I can't do anything. I can't move forward. And then it makes you feel like you're a loser because you're not being productive. But then maybe if you understand what's going on astrologically, you understand that it's more of a rest time. It's more of a hibernation time. You're supposed to go inward and you're supposed to be productive in an inward way as opposed to an external way. So then you don't have to feel guilty about taking that time and doing a different kind of work. It helps you understand like how to focus your energies more. So, and also because I think like we get caught up in this very like external and very Western based way of living, which is basically succeed, produce, work, make money, have external results that can be verified and validated by everybody else outside of you. And that makes sense because that's part of communicating on a macro level, but that's not necessarily very satisfying. And that doesn't have a lot of depth. It's very like one dimensional. And ultimately that's why, like, you know, when you have a growing sense of dis-ease, unease, or you have a growing sense of there's something more, it's because you want to understand like the other energies that are at play. And, you know, I think that's why astrology is just one method. And maybe you don't connect with it at all. Maybe you're like, fuck astrology. That sounds stupid. I don't like it. Every time I hear anything about it, you know, I don't relate to it. Then don't listen to it. Don't read about it. It's not for you, you know? I don't think every single school of like way of approaching understanding the world's energy is for every single person. Like, you know, you don't have to feel everything. If you're feeling it, cool. If you're not, cool. It's the same thing like when I read my astrology, like a horoscope for like my 2 signs. Well, I take what makes sense to me and connects with me, and the rest I just toss it. I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, but you know, blah 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 said that you know, I'm gonna have a challenging time with my family, so then I'm going to go start a fight with my family, or I'm going to always be looking over my shoulder waiting to get into a fight with my family. That's stupid. Like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. It's gone. It's just trying to kind of tell you what the weather is, but on a planetary sense.
Right. I feel like one of my first things with astrology is, you know, people would say they would be affected by the full moon, and I'm like, full moon, I don't really feel affected by it, but I did start feeling affected by other people affected by the full moon.
Right. Right.
You know, like I could feel their aggro-ness, like how you were saying.
Right.
So in a way, I am sensitive around the time of full moon, sensitive to other people though freaking out.
Right. Right. Well, you are a sensitive person to other people's energies. That's just like your personality and your makeup. So yeah, like some people are really feel also, so like when eclipses happen, also you can be affected by certain moons and not affected by other moons, because every full moon, every new moon is occurs in a different sign at a certain degree. So you know, if my moon sign is, you know, Gemini 20, then if there's going to be an eclipse, or there's going to be a full moon or a new moon at Gemini 19 or 20 or anywhere in that range, I'm probably going to feel that more. Or if I have any planet that's in that zone of what that full moon is going to be. So every moon is different, and everything's going to affect you differently, right, Toots? So that's why, like, some people are affected by, maybe you weren't affected by moons for a long time, and then all of a sudden you had one and you really felt it. Like this past year, we had a lot of eclipses, and they were like they were triggering a lot of points for me, and those are very powerful eclipses. Now, everyone might feel that on a general level, but certain people who are going to be activated because of their planetary makeup will feel those more strongly. So you could be really sensitive to a moon this year and then next year not so much, and that's not weird.
Right.
And then other people like Cancers who are ruled by the moon or who have a lot of Cancer in their makeup, like, so every sign is ruled by a planet or two, and so you're going to be affected by what happens with those planets more. So for example, I'm Gemini rising. Mercury rules Gemini, so I'm always affected when Mercury in retrograde happens. Like, I feel it, but that doesn't bother me because I know how to deal with it.
Okay, so what does the retrograde motion mean? Like all the planets have their orbits. When I hear the word retrograde, I think is the planet moving backwards?
No, the planet isn't moving backwards. It just appears to be moving backwards. So,
Like,
yeah.
like if it's retrograde here,
Mm-hmm.
is it doing something else if you're viewing it from Australia?
No, it
Oh,
doesn't matter what hemisphere you're in. It's just, I mean, they just say retrograde, and it's not actually moving backwards. It's just moving backwards in conceptually in the like in its degree and its sign. But when things go in retrograde motion, and like, so Mercury is the one that goes retrograde the most. That's like, every 3 months or whatever, every 4 months, every 3 months, I think. But every single planet goes retrograde, and that normally means then for that planet there's going to be it's more of a time of review, and it can mean different things for different planets, but it's not like a negative thing, just like, when you go backwards in your life to try and recontemplate different things, or you revisit different things, it doesn't make that bad. You don't always have to be moving forward. Sometimes you have to move backwards to move forward. So it's nothing to be scared of.
what's a so everyone knows that one. What's a positive one that we can look forward to?
I mean, again, it's not even about negative and positive. It's about
What's another one that we know should know about?
well, like Venus goes in retrograde often, relatively often. And so this is kind of more pop astrology, but sometimes when Venus goes in retrograde, you'll like a love interest from the past will return, and you can reconsider that. Maybe it didn't work at the time when you met them, you felt a strong connection. And but for whatever reason, there's a lot of external factors or whatever, timing, etc., that didn't make that happen. And Venus retrograde happens, sometimes things from the past come back and you can redo it. Or let's say you had a gnarly breakup, you never dealt with that shit. Venus retrograde comes back and you're going to have to deal with that shit. You know what I mean? It could be positive, negative. What does that mean?
Right. Going back to the Australia thing, I trip out on how it's location based. Like if I was born at the exact same time and the exact same date, but I was born in Melbourne, it'd be totally different, right?
Yes and no. So if you're born at the exact same time, at the exact same day, and when you say exact same time, you mean like it's 3:00 in LA, and then in the person in New York is born at 9:00, but it's
Right.
the same time in time.
Yeah.
It's different. Well,
Let's,
yeah.
let's say the time and the day is not the variable, but the location is.
Well,
How different would it be?
location makes a difference in the sense, well, of course, because then your position, your planetary position. So of course that makes a difference. It's not going to be hugely different, probably. If you're in the same country, for example, or a country like America, there's like six hours difference, but it will make a difference. Or like when you do your, like something that, so, there's your natal chart. That's basically what you do. And it's based on your birth time, and it shows you who you are. That's your makeup. That's what you're born with. Okay. And there's other charts too. And I feel like a lot of people don't know the other charts. So things that can help with predictive things are your solar return. So that basically is your chart. That shows like where all the planets are when your sun is back in the exact same position, when the sun is back in the exact same position that it was when you were born. And that will show you sort of and that happens once a year, and that will show you sort of a a map of what's going to happen, or what the energy is and what the themes are going to be of that year, because your rising sign won't be the same, probably won't be the same, might be the same. Often it's different, and often all your stuff is in different signs and in different locations, and it'll kind of give you the flavor of the year that's to come. So you can also do your Mars return. That it's the same concept, but that's more for like a 2-year period, and kind of shows you where, because Mars is the planet of action, shows you where your energy and your actions, the flavor of what your energy and actions will be focused on. You can do your lunar return, which is once a month. And that'll tell you, because the moon sort of rules your emotions and your inner state. The lunar return will give you the flavor of what your emotions will be for that month. And you can do, you can also do your progressive chart, and that basically will show you your progression. That basically shows you, okay, I was born, however many years ago. I was born 40 years ago. I just turned 40. And so my progress chart, you basically add a degree per year. So now in this moment in my life, I'm, what am I now? 17. I'm a Sagittarius. So I'm going to approach my life more, maybe I'm going to feel things more from a Sagittarian perspective. So you can use progressions to see what, there'll be different trigger points, and you'll be able to identify those trigger points, and then you'll be able to see with what's going on with the planets right now, what time is going to be meaningful for you. So let me give you an example, because I'm like saying a lot of words and I feel like it doesn't really make sense. So let's say I'm interested in my love life, right? A lot of people are interested in their love life. So one thing you would do is you could do your Venus returns, because Venus rules love and also rules money. And you can see, okay, for that year, whether what the theme of your love life is going to be. And sometimes you do a chart and it's really clear, and it's like, damn, this is a powerful chart. This is going to be a heavy year for me.
Wait, does your year start on your birthday, or does it start like at the 2019 January 1st?
Well, it depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing a solar return, it's almost always right on your birthday. If you're doing a Venus return, it can be anywhere like within a month of your birthday, because Venus moves similarly in speed to the sun, but not quite. So it could, and also Venus goes into retrograde motion. So my Venus return chart will only apply from that point in time till retrograde. So let's say my birthday's in November. My Venus is at the same point as my birth year in October, but it goes retrograde in February. Well, when I run that Venus retrograde chart, it's going to be from October to February. And then you have to run another one. So it's just about when the planet crosses the point. When it crosses the point, that's when it starts. Your Mars return can be like several months before or after your birthday, because it's like a 2-year period. It's not exact, doesn't run exactly with the sun. So all depends on the orbits. But you have these like power points. So there's angles on the chart. There's also your sun moon midpoint. There's also, like, for love is things that relate to love. There's 12 houses in your astrological chart. The 5th house is about creativity, love, romance, children. And the 7th house is about partnership, marriage. So you'll want to see what planet rules the 5th house. So if my 5th house is in Libra, Venus rules my 5th house, because Venus rules Libra. And if Sagittarius rules my 7th house, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So I'm going to care about where Jupiter and where Venus are. So when you're looking at what's going on in the planets today or in the upcoming months or whatever, you're going to want to know when that activates these special points that you have. See what I'm saying? And that's how you know when that's going to be a powerful time for you or not.
So,
or more primed time.
So when you're going to go get a pro reading from a pro,
yes,
I want to get my Venus return, Mars return. I already forgot everything you said.
Well, it depends on what you want to know. So normally,
I want to know everything.
Normally when people go to get their, that's the thing, it goes so deep. And I think a pro will normally give you your birth chart and describe your birth chart to you. And that's if you're a newbie, then they're going to basically tell you like who you are, what you're comprised of, and like what's in your, kind of like what's your astrological DNA. And again, this is just a guide. So, you know, something that my dad always tells me, like, you know, it's just a guide. For example, he has a brother who had a brother who was like, astrologically was like this, like the king of the world, like had the almost like the most fortuitous, most lucky, most auspicious um, astrological chart. But you know, the Korean War happened, he died, and so it doesn't matter. You can be like the most talented person. You could be the kid of like a Olympian and a, you know, a opera diva or whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean, if you don't put in the time and energy, that doesn't mean you're going to be a star athlete or a star singer. That doesn't mean also, and there's all these external things that are that at play. You know, there could be, you can get into a car accident, you can die. You know what I mean? So it's just a guide. That's what your natal chart is. It kind of gives you an understanding of like why you maybe have a tendency to be a certain way or are drawn to certain things. So when you go get a reading by a pro, they're definitely going to give you your natal chart and kind of explain that. That's the most base level stuff, though that's very important. But if you have a specific question or you have specific things that you want to know, you should definitely tell them beforehand so that they can run the charts that will be applicable to you. So like, let's say you want to know like, oh, am I going to fall in love? Am I going to have a kid? Something like that. They're going to be able to run your Venus returns and understand like whether this is going to be a good year for you or what year is going to be a good year for you or a more likely year for you to meet somebody. Or if you're going to, you know, if you have other questions about business or about money, that's almost always why anybody goes to anyone. Tarot, fortune telling, palm read, anything, astrology. It's almost always about business / money and love. Those are like the only main two things that people ask about. So though she'll run different, she or he will run different charts to understand like what are the points that you're interested in. So if you're interested in business, you're probably gonna be concerned about your second house, which is the house of earned income, or your 10th house, which is the house of fame and recognition. And you're going to want to know, you're going to look at the transits and you're going to want to know, you know, when those points are activated for you. So there's different ways of looking at things. So if you are going to go see a professional, if you have any particular questions, you should definitely let them know in advance, because that will definitely affect the quality of the reading. They're not going to be able to just guess it off the top of their head, and they're definitely not going to be able to just run some charts for you. They'll probably have run your solar return to know what's coming up for you for like the next year or two, and they'll definitely do your natal chart, but who knows if they'll do the other stuff if they don't have to. Also, it's like a lot of work. If you go to a decent astrologer and it's like $300 for them to talk to you for like 2-3 hours, they deserve that. It can take hours and hours to really to really run the charts and really like notice patterns and be able to understand and interpret things. So don't be chintzy with your astrologer, because if you are chintzy, you'll get a chintzy reading.
I wasn't really asking like I'm going to go see one. I'm just saying in general.
Yeah, no, I know. I know you're not going to see one.
Well,
You're gonna,
also, I have you too, so.
yeah, I know. I'm talking about for general people. It's like people who are like, oh, I want to go to therapy and spend the money, but they'll spend tons of money on like booze or like clothes or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's totally fair. But what's really your priority? If your priority is your mental health or your spiritual health, or your priority is understanding sort of like a deeper energy that you're curious about and you're drawn to, then you got to pay for that. Otherwise, if you don't, then you can spend your money and your time and your resources in different ways that might be more meaningful to you. It might be way more meaningful for you to like go on a shopping trip or whatever than it is to exercise or go have fun and have a drink and do whatever. That's fine. Like spend your resources as you see fit. But I'm just saying, like, a lot of this stuff it's work. So people should respect that. I'm not even, like I said, I'm not an astrologer. The more deeper I go, the more I really respect and understand what the craft is and how much time goes into it. So you can get like your target version. If you want your target version or your like Forever 21 version of your astrology, yeah, just go look it up online and read whatever. But if you want some real shit, you got to pay for it.
Right. Okay, here's a question. I remember reading about a 13th sign.
Right.
It's a guy with 2 snakes. How does that factor in, and why is it why does no one, I guess, celebrate that guy?
I don't fuck with that guy.
Why?
I don't know. It just didn't really.
He doesn't show up in your studies or whatever?
No, and I mean, I've read all about it and stuff, and there's always like different changes. So, like they downgraded Pluto. I'm a Scorpio, right? So Pluto rules Scorpio traditionally, but so does Mars. And they downgraded Pluto from a planet or whatever. But I'm just kind of like, whatever, dude. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's like a very meaningful thing to do, but it just didn't really seem to impact anything that I was interested in. So I just ignored it.
Right, right.
Maybe that's lame. I already have so much, there's so much stuff already to look into and read. Like I don't really concern myself with that.
I know there's all these talks about the moon and in astrology, but what if the moon's not even real? You know what I'm saying?
Okay, that's not really what I meant, but okay, whatever. It's made of cheese, man.
Or what if the planet's not even round? Like you know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, when you ask questions like that, then it's just kind of like, what is reality? You know what I mean? What is real? What are we even looking at? And in that case, we're basing it's a system of knowledge based on a perception / simulation of what we believe reality is. And even if that reality is false, it's still an interpretation of those energies. So it's fine. It still applies. Do you know what I mean? So like our whole existence could not be real, but it's real to us. So does it really matter? You know what I mean?
Like what came first, right? The chicken or the egg?
I'm just, even if this is all a dream and all a simulation, like I'm still trying my best to understand this simulation because that's what I'm programmed to do, right? I'm living.
Remember when we shared that dream, we did a podcast together?
Which podcast? Oh, this one? This dream? Yeah, I do. Like, what is time? You know what I mean? I just had this conversation with a kid last night, what we're doing right now. Like, yeah, I read this quote today. I forget who it was by now, but some cool dude. But he was basically like, yeah, has it ever occurred to you that like, every moment is a memory except for this fleeting moment right now? And it's true. So everything is a reconstruction. Our entire notion of reality is a reconstruction. So whatever, and like they've already proven that time is static. Time is the fourth dimension. It's not linear. So we've already done this podcast. We've probably already done infinite alternate versions of this podcast.
True.
So everything is now, whatever. I'm just trying to live.
I like it. Okay. All that being said,
Mm-hmm.
you have any predictions about the next, let's say, till now till January 1st, that like a general for everybody thing that we should look out for or anything like that?
I do, but I forgot because I didn't really look into it before. I have it all written down.
Just for the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, because there's a full moon coming, and every time there's like a moon cycle, I always like revisit it and I see where the degree is at and I see what sign's at. So I kind of like look and see what's going on with that and see how that's going to affect me, But I don't remember. I've been working so much this week. I have kind of been in like a robot zombie zone. Right. So I should have prepared for this podcast more. Sorry, watchers. I could give you more advice, but I don't know right now.
What about for January or for the whole year?
I don't know. I haven't looked into the next year yet either. Okay. I know for me, like for example, because it's hard to retain everything, but I know I ran my solar return for my birthday because I had my 40th birthday last month. That was a big one. I ran my solar return. I ran my Venus return. I ran all this stuff. And basically for me, my themes are internal, grinding, just work, internal, do the work, focus on my creative activities, focus on manifesting my certain projects and doing my own internal, exploration and discovery, as opposed to a more external action-based manifestation, which is basically the following year. So that makes me feel, oh, this is how I want to focus. This is where I would be best supported in focusing my energy. or it's a lot about like collaboration and working with people. So then I'm going to be really open towards doing that as opposed to doing something that's just about my project or my brand or my work or whatever. So, you know, that's why you do the solar return, to see like what the themes are. And you can do, obviously, so like if you read Power Path or something, they give you the monthly. I love Power Path. It's one of the sites that I really feel like I connected with or whatever. I was really feeling like the message that they were saying. Though they're basically basing their monthly thing on just the transits that are going on in general on the planet. And that's why they can do a monthly recap for that month or prediction for that month or guide for that month. That's not specific to your sign, because it's just saying this is what the planetary movements are and the planetary energy and themes are. Do with this what you will, depending on your sign, you know?
Right.
So I kind of like those more, because I feel like a lot of times, like when it's specific to like a certain, I don't know, you can already go pretty deep just talking about the transits that are going on for the whole world, you know? And I kind of like that better. I don't know.
Very cool. So what else?
I don't know. What are the questions you have for me? Anything?
I think that's it. I think that's almost an hour.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Unless you want to drop some more knowledge.
I don't know if I have knowledge to drop, but I will just say, like, so I've always been interested in astrology since I was a little kid. And it's really cool to, like, once you start going deep, you get to learn so much more of it. And I just think it's important to always remember that it's just, you know, the world speaks to you in ways that you allow it to speak to you. So sometimes I look on astrology, and sometimes, for example, I have had a lot of really powerful messages through, you know, animal guides or spirit guides and that kind of reading based on those cards. And if you had told me before I got into that, oh, you're going to be into this stuff, I'd be like, no, I have no connection to that. I'm not Native American. I don't even go out in nature that much. Well, I do now, but I didn't before. But for whatever reason, I had a very powerful experience that sort of like sparked that. And then I've always had really good connection with those cards. When I draw things, cards from that deck, I really, really I see it and I feel like it speaks to me clearly. Now, when I used to be into tarot when I was a little kid. I remember I got my first deck at Barnes & Noble, the classic deck. I had no idea what it was. I was drawn to it, but I never knew how to use it. And then later on, when I started pulling cards or doing spreads with tarot, I just didn't feel it. Like, it didn't make sense to me. And it didn't feel, you get a certain feeling when when something connects with you. But later on, a couple years into it, I picked it up again and I started doing it. And now I really feel like it speaks to me. So I'm just saying, like, if something didn't work for you before, it doesn't mean you shouldn't try it again. Because sometimes at different phases in your life, that energy is going to come to you and those messages are going to come to you in a different way. And I think it's important for people to be open to different methodology and to be adventurous about it. Because if you only are you really can get a message clearly when you're getting the same message and the same themes from all different sources. If it keeps coming back to the same message, then you know that's the message. And I think a lot of times people are asking these questions or are interested in this because they want to know. They want to know. And to know, that's a mind thing and that's a control thing. And it is important, and it's important in surviving everyday life. But knowing with the mind, that's not the same as understanding. And I feel like really a lot of these things are to help you to understand and to process. And a lot of times people use these things because they want to know the future. They want to predict the future. And that's a very binary and a very limited perspective, because at the end of the day, what we really need to work on and practice is being comfortable in the unknown and being comfortable with not knowing. Because if we have understanding of broader things, then we won't feel that pressure. Just wanting to know is just about control. And that really normally doesn't, it only gives you temporary relief. It's like a trick, you know? So I feel like this stuff is actually way better to helping you understand on the broader thing on a bigger level. And that actually will give you that comfort, and that sense of peace that people are really looking for is more desire to be comfortable with the unknown. It's not actually to know these things, because that's not really it's a different way of looking at of asking the questions and of looking at your life. And I feel like that's, if I can impart that to anyone, I would really encourage people to learn how to be comfortable with that. I read this one thing once about when I was pulling on animal cards. There's an animal card for Black Panther, and Black Panther is about the unknown. And something that it said in this book was about, never forget that when you were born and you were in the womb, you were in complete darkness. You couldn't see anything. You didn't know anything. Nothing existed. Yet that was the most comfortable place that you have ever been in your whole existence, was in that womb. And so when you're in a place of darkness, or when you're in a place of where you can't see, try to access that feeling of comfort, being in this sort of great mystery soup of nothingness, because it's actually everything. And it's actually a really, really, it can be the most comfortable place and the most natural place that you've ever been. So that's what I always try to focus on when I'm really challenged, because I've found that the more I try to figure stuff out, the more fucking bummed I am. So it's less about trying to force your will on the world, and more about just trying to be cool with it and understand and have that kind of level of peace. At least that's what I try to do with my practice, and astrology helps me do that, and so do all these other things. So
I like that. I like that a lot.
Cool.
I do.
Ruffy likes it too.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing to end on.
Okay, cool.
All we know is that we don't know anything.
That's right. I love it.
All right. Thanks for talking to me today.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
And we'll hang out soon.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.